Well, welcome everyone to the Coaching to Flourish podcast. I am your host, John. Today I have B. B was with me through a 2.0. Did we do a 1.0 too together?
Just 2.0.
Just a 2.0. And you were living in Colorado, but now you're in Oregon. You're on the other side of Mount
We
Hood.
still live in Colorado. It's like, it sounds fancy. We're summering in Oregon, which is actually really nice because we don't have air conditioning in Colorado. In Denver, it's really hot right now.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
And here you are, and I'm psyched because I'm not leading any more courses anymore. So for me, the number of participants who I know have gone through the program, I feel like there's, that percentage is shifting. So here we are, right? And what I'd love to go is get your story, get your experience at the 2.0 and go from there.
Oh gosh. So
right. Yeah.
Like the story of how I got into coaching?
Yeah, why not? Let's start there.
Okay.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
I'm thinking, so about maybe, 10 or 11 years ago now, I was on a theology retreat. And there were these two women who were older than me. They had kids that were maybe like 10 years younger than me. And they were so cool. They had this just like energy about them, and their perspective on life. And they were just really self-aware. I wouldn't have had that verbiage at the time, but they were coaches. And so they helped start the Western Seminary coaching program. And actually part of their job was to go around the world to different mission organizations and do like a week-long coaching course for different organizations. So I spent the week with them, and they invited me to like a weekend seminar. I think I was maybe 20, 21, and I just fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, you don't have to tell people what to do. You don't have to have the answers. All you really have to do is be curious and ask questions, and people get to where they need to be. And I work with a lot of kids, and I can say that I had so many conversations with high school kids where, sometimes you're like, wow, I have no idea what to say to you. And sometimes you give them the best advice in the world and you're like, you're welcome. And then they don't take it. And so this was like this beautiful in between where you're like, oh, what do you think? Or like, hey, let's just ask some questions about what you're talking about. So I knew I wanted to pursue it. But at that time I had like just graduated from George Fox, which is a university outside of Portland, Oregon, and did not have the space or the means to kind of pursue that. But it's been on the back burner for 10 years. And so I think it's 3 years ago now, I did the 1.0, and then I just went straight into the 2.0. And it was fantastic. I think for me personally, I love learning. It makes me feel alive. And so just how much I learned and how much that has changed my interactions with people, the way I listen, the way I go through life was phenomenal. Like, even if I wasn't actually coaching, that alone I think would have been worth it. But I am going to pursue coaching still. But yeah,
we just had a little one.
Condensed.
I mean, you just had a little. I mean, that tends to,
yes,
alter,
change the speed of life.
right? Alter trajectories.
Yes.
But I mean, coaching is like relatively kid friendly. It's not like you can.
Yeah, I can see how it's going to be fantastic since my husband's in law school and working. I call myself, I Googled like cool names for stay-at-home moms, and there was some pretty creative ones. And so, because I found myself saying like, oh, I'm just a mom. And then I'm like, no, this is actually incredibly like challenging and rewarding. So we need the reframe. I reframed that.
So 10 months, is that?
10 months.
So almost the year. What was the most surprising thing about parenthood for you?
Oh, that's a great question. How it's just, gosh, the most surprising is just how different life is. I have all these preconceived notions of like, I'm going to walk for 2 hours every day. I'm still going to do, and then it's like, okay, you are a little human too. And it's this ebb and flow of us as a family. and how I think it's a both and thing, like so rewarding and so tiring, and then so fun, and then so like, oh, I really want to listen to this podcast or go do this thing. And then other times you're like, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. So for me, it's just a lot of feelings.
A lot of feels, a lot of emotion. It's like having
Oh yeah.
at times an uninvited housemate that is extremely demanding housemate.
Yes. And you're like, oh, I always tell him, I'm like, why you gotta act like a little baby? And then I'm like, well, you are. That totally makes sense right now. You only
That
get so
checks
many
out.
years for that.
That checks out.
So we're going to keep him. We like him.
That's cool. That's good. Yeah, our littlest one, he just turned 1 in June.
Yeah.
That's
Because
great.
during the 2.0, your wife was having a baby. And I remember being like, oh, I like can really resonate with that right now.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then our 4-year-old, he had his birthday too. And so the two of them, it's nice. Like, like the buddy system is great. It's good
Yeah, that
stuff.
I can see that being beneficial.
But the upfront cost is extreme. So you got to get through. Got to get through it. You got to get to 4. Like that's to us. It's like once you're 4. Yeah.
Yes. I try and like people always say, oh, enjoy it. It goes so fast. But I do think certain personalities and people vibe with different stages of childhood. And I love middle schoolers. Like people are always like, oh, that's so weird. But that's I love middle schoolers. Like I'm not nervous for that stage at all. It was the baby stage that I was like, so what do you do? And people are like, oh, you'll figure it out. And I mean, you do, but I was still like, seriously though, like, what does your day look like? And nobody could answer the question for me. So
I mean, I love working with middle schoolers too. I mean, they're just like, it's like, these are like a certain, I don't know. I mean, there's a certain vibrancy, there's certain energy they have this for life. Like their appetite for life is enormous.
that's a good way to put it.
The how has coaching changed the way, or let's sharpen this. You were in education.
Yep.
How do you think, if you could, put coaching and education together, where do you see it going? How do you see it playing out? Like what?
Yeah. I think we talked about this in your class, but it would be so cool if teachers had the time and space to become coach certified, and just the way that the tools that would give teachers in their approach to kids. I mean, I know we already put so much on teachers, like, hey, can you do this, and this? But I think it helps so much personally and in your relationship with kids. And just, I mean, the title of this is Cultivating Care. And when people feel cared about, when kids feel cared about, they listen to you and they respect you. And I think that changes the dynamics of the classroom instantly. You're still going to have a million other things going on, but yeah, that relationship can be there. And then there's so many cool self-awareness tools that you could use with kids, and it's fun to coach young people because I mean, self-awareness is a really big deal. And I mean, the more that they can kind of step up and do that for themselves, I think the better off they will be as humans, and carry those tools into, wherever they end up.
Right. I think it's interesting hearing different teachers, I don't know, gymnastics coaches, different people who are interacting with young people who are coming from a fixed mindset, level 1 information gathering perspective. And then hearing that and hearing how usual that sounds, how that's ever, I mean, that feels extremely familiar. But then knowing like what's happening on the child end, where, they're starting to shut down, that, they get defensive. I mean, this is like very stereotypical, like cultural forces. I've been thinking a lot about this. What's the tipping point? Like what do you, and this is like, I mean, we can talk about this forever, but what do you think will be the cultural tipping point? Because I think it's inevitable. It's inevitable that coaching is coming for education. So if you're an educator out there, it's coming for you. Like hopefully in this lifetime, if not this one, then, you know,
I
the
hope
next 100
so.
years will get
Yeah.
there, but it will get there simply because this works, and whatever works is going to be adopted, and it's just going to work.
I like your
It's going to happen.
confidence in that.
It will. It's what I've seen over the past 10 years, like the growth in the coaching profession over the last 10 years is extreme.
Yeah.
A lot of it's been driven by the executive coaching, because in the executive world, if you don't get on board and it work and you're not giving yourself an advantage, well, guess what? Some other company is going to come in and do
Yeah.
that. And then there you go. Education is a slower plodding dinosaur. You know, it doesn't have the same kind of pressures that, you know, the competition creates in companies. However, I do think it's coming for education.
Good.
What do you think the tipping point will be in
Like
education?
what's going to get us there?
What's the this pandemic might be it. Like this might be our tipping point.
Because
But what do
parents are
you, from an
teachers
educator
now.
standpoint, yeah, what do you think the tipping point is going to be
Oh,
in
that's a
getting
really
on
good
board with this?
question.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, awareness. I feel like the more people who experience coaching, the more it's like, oh, you know, it's not like this magic answer, but I mean, if people have been coached, you experience it is, I call it magic, because you're like, oh, that light bulb, that expansion of self-awareness to where you think, gosh, how did I not know that before? Like, how is that not part of what I did? And so maybe it takes people experiencing it, like, to believe in it, or yeah, spreading the awareness somehow, like getting the message out there. Because I think people can think coaching is like a very fluffy thing, or they can think of it as like counseling, or I mean, sports coaching. They're like, wait, you coach people one-on-one, like basketball? I'm like, oh no, I should add the word life in there, because we call it coaching. If you're a coach, that makes sense, but sports coaching is much more popular. And so I think it's just normalizing it, making it normal, kind of like counseling, like mental health, normalizing going to counseling, because you don't have to have an issue to do that, or we all have issues. It's just a matter of if we're going to deal with them or not.
Gonna mess with that or not. Yeah, I mean so when you experience coaching, right, what's the moment in with like that coaching got you, like that you thought, oh, this is it? Like,
It was definitely at that seminar, that weekend seminar I did like 10 years ago, because I just remember these light bulbs going off of like, oh, this is so helpful. And I liken it to like when I first started to follow Jesus. You're like, oh my gosh, and you just want to tell everybody about it, and you're like, why aren't you as excited as me? Like, why aren't you jumping on board with this? So that light bulb moment, and I've had it throughout, actually, even after I started the 1.0 and 2.0 training. I remember, volunteering to be coached and kind of being skeptical, like, I don't think I have anything to work on at the moment. And my coach trainer was Brian, and he coached me, and he took me through a future self, and I like closed my eyes, and it's this exercise you do in coach training. And I ended up crying during it, and in front of my 1.0 class. And it was just one of those powerful moments where I was like, what just happened? And I still carry that sentence that we did in that exercise to this day when I'm going through something that I know is good for me, but I know is really hard. And I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. So sometimes I resist like going to that place of like, oh, but it's not fun. And so, yeah, it was really powerful. And I ended up in tears, but I was like, they were good tears, like tears of growth. But those are those reminders that you're like, this has been amazing. And then sharing that experience with other people, like knowing what a gift it is to give to people, gets me really excited about it.
I have a friend from Dubai who calls those truth tears.
Ooh, I love that. I might borrow your friend from Dubai sentence.
He's this big burly Australian with like long flowing hair. He's like,
I like that.
Those are called good tears. They're truth tears. Can't do an Australian accent at the moment.
I know. I was like, that's a good try. I'm getting the vibe.
Can you do one? You got an Aussie?
I can say like 2 sentences, like "G'day, mate. Let's throw
There you
another
go.
shot in front of Bobby." Like, I need specific sentences.
Gosh, man. I love doing Hagrid's voice. I think it's my favorite. Uh,
That's my go-to Harry Potter word. Like, if you want to speak in an English accent, just say Harry Potter, and there you
Harry
go.
Potter. There you go. Hey, how are you? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Gosh.
Been known to do a few accents, not well, but I do them. When you have a 10-month-old, you do anything to get them to stop crying.
It's amazing how, like, so I always, when I was growing up, I grew up in Pittsburgh and I wanted to grow up with, you have different influences and then you have Andy Warhol and like his factory. And I always wanted to grow up with like a factory with cool people just doing interesting things in the corner, like,
Yeah.
like expanding their research. And then I realized, whoa, like we're kind of doing that. We live like my partner is another life coach. And
Yeah.
there's someone, some 4-year-old in the corner doing some imaginative play. I'm like, wow, this is it. This is Warhol's factory. This is the future. What's that sentence? What's the sentence of your future self? What did she say?
The sentence that came was, "It's worth it."
Hmm.
That was what my future self told me. Like, oh, it's worth it. And that's been like key when I'm debating something I know I should do versus, like, Brene Brown says this beautifully, choosing courage over comfort. My way to embody that to myself is, it's worth it. Like, oh, it's worth it.
I
The
love that.
long term.
Love that. It goes back to a lot of what we talk about in coach training, and the whole idea is choose something that is worth the pain, of the inevitable setbacks, the inevitable challenges. But if you're up to something that's bigger than that, then you're not oriented towards doing something because it feels good. You're oriented to do something because it's meaningful.
Yes. I was listening to a sermon once, and he mentioned, like, I don't think people are searching for happiness. I think people are searching for meaning, and happiness is a byproduct of that. And I just remember thinking, oh, that hits me hard. That's good, because I think we can get caught up in, like, do what makes you happy, but like it's almost like, do something that's so meaningful to you that, like, your joy flows out of that. Your happiness flows out of that.
Right.
And I think coaching can be that for a lot of people.
Right. I mean, these are the times with, fighting for social justice and social equality, racial equality and all of it. I mean, there's a leadership program Moise and I went through in our mid-20s called The Bigger Game. And the idea of this bigger game is that you choose what you're up to, and then what you choose to do, the leadership, like the quality of your leadership depends on the quality of what you choose to do. Mm. And so it's kind of this opposite idea of what we have in schools, where we'll train you to do anything, like, middle school, high school, we'll train you to be well-rounded, and then you go out and pick a thing. This is, you pick a thing, and then you ask what skill sets are required to do that thing.
Interesting.
And it really stretches us. And this is woven through the 2.0 program. It's just not, and there are elements of it. And think, right, the idea of empathetic motivation, right, comes from this idea of the bigger game and what we're up to. So what in the 2.0, let's talk 2.0. How would you describe the 2.0, or what were some of your favorite concepts that came from the 2.0?
Oh, I loved, well, I remember you saying the first week of it, the point of 2.0 is for you. It's for your growth and, like, who you are as a coach. And I remember right away just being like, oh, I'm so excited. And, I think that's so important, because it's like, what do you bring to the coaching profession? What unique, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, just with how divisive and turmoil our world is in. Like, what unique, we all bring our experiences to every conversation. We bring where we're raised, our past experiences, our family, our relationships, what's going on in our lives. We bring that in every conversation, whether we're aware of it or not. And so, the more self-aware you are of all of those things at play, and how being compassionate towards others with where they're coming from, I think that's such a big game changer. And so I think in the 2.0, it was awesome to find out what I uniquely bring to coaching, what my energy is, how that interacts with my client's energy. And that was incredibly helpful. And then I just love geeking out over all of those concepts of like flow and reframing, and just kind of deep diving into what it looks like to coach around those things, or be able to play with it while you're coaching, and you're not necessarily teaching your client and breaking it down of what this is, but you're including it in the questions that you're asking. That was incredible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like what happens in 2.0 is, that's it. Like if I were to break it down, like for me too, I feel like there's a huge element of a 2.0 is how do you, in all of your uniqueness,
Mm-hmm.
how does that mesh with the coaching experience?
Yeah.
And I don't know of any other journey of training that grows you as much as coach training. I know, I mean, there are other things out there. Entrepreneurship is another big one that stretches people. Acting, maybe, I don't know, counseling. I mean, there are so many things out there that really grow, but what coaching does is what I love about it and love about the 2.0 is that you're almost encouraged to find ways to break the coaching model in
Mm-hmm.
mindful ways, and knowing this is why I'm doing it, this is how I'm doing it, this is how this goes out, and then can you bring it back into the coaching model? That
Yeah.
to me is when people are doing, like, that's when you know coaching. I can break it on purpose and I can fix it on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I hope people get out of the 2.0.
And it does grow you as a person so much, like it can't help but leak into all the areas of your life in a good way. Like my husband was like, you listen way better since you've become a coach. I'm like, thanks for noticing. I've been trying so hard, those type of things. And if it's the person you live with, that's usually a good sign.
Totally. I feel like it's one of those things where once you've experienced it and know, oh, wow, like this is what it's like to be a coach and to be in that space for extended periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like there's a revision of all the other like areas of your life that could also have the same kind of shift.
Oh yeah. I think one of the biggest things with the 2.0, that is applied to the rest of my life, is just this idea of being curious, and like, because we're humans, we can help but judge people or judge things, especially right now. It's so easy to hear one thing about somebody and put them in a box, or one thing that somebody said at one point and cancel them out. It's just crazy. And so I think when you're curious about, oh, what reasons, why do you believe that? What reasons, or asking questions and like genuinely seeking to understand, people feel cared about. And when people feel cared about, they can actually be vulnerable or be honest. And good stuff happens in that space. And so I've been working on being curious in all, not just when I'm coaching, but when I feel myself, get angry or disagree, or, why am I so annoyed right now? Like, what about this is annoying me? And so it's been really, it's a fun experiment to carry with me of like, I just freaked out. So it's a little late to be curious, but let's be curious about what that was. So it's challenging, but in a really good way. And I can tell it's just going to be like a lifelong process. But it's a good one. I think it's one that's worth it. It's worthy of going on.
Yeah, it's like basic human training that I feel like
But
is.
it's not a fixed mindset either, which is huge.
Mm-mm. And it shows up. That's what's so cool about it, is I feel like the personal growth shows up in how you coach, because like what you're saying before, like each of us brings so like it's hard to see yourself and all the filters and assumptions in your story. I mean, it's hard to see that, but
Yeah.
that does show up in how you ask coaching questions.
Oh yeah.
And that's so cool. I mean, that's you now, like it's a vehicle for personal professional growth
Mm-hmm.
that you can finely tune and listen to every sigh, and how well are you able to stay in curiosity even when you're wrestling with an assumption. What do you do with that assumption? Can you bring that assumption into a curiosity? Is it coming from you? Is it coming from them? Like it's just this richness of
Yeah. Oh,
connection.
when I coach, I always find myself connecting on like a level one listening, like, oh, and wanting to ask information facts, or me too, oh, all those things that come in, you're like, actually that's not helpful right now, so step aside. And what's the deeper listening. But yeah, I still can acknowledge, like, oh, that's I not right now, I want to listen deeper than that.
Right. Right. It's like I want to get myself out of this and be over there and
Mm-hmm.
feel those feels, that feel your feels,
Which is
like,
incredibly helpful with just where the world's at right now,
yes.
and listening to what's going on, because there's sides to everything. But there are competent, like, we're so much more complex as humans than we like give each other credit for. And so it's fascinating to, yeah, be curious. It's hard, but like to continue to push into that, um and treat people that you don't even if you don't agree with them, as humans, as people. um I guess it's revolutionary, but I don't feel like it should be.
Well, it's interesting. I've been playing with this idea of, looking at school, or looking at coaching in schools. How much, or how do you best deliver knowledge that obviously, like, the teacher knows, you know, this knowledge? Like what are the ways to deliver knowledge in a coaching way? It's not quite, it's different from coaching, but different from teaching. Like how is that? Is it like knowledge coaching? Like, because there seems to be, like, even, a couple of the people on the podcast here, they have very specific niches. They have very specific things that require a knowledge base to also be put in place.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's
And
almost, yeah,
yeah,
it's
how
kind
do you
of,
do that?
I'm thinking of like a teacher as a facilitator.
Right.
But obviously they have experience in the subject, and a lot of times students don't. But it's that experience drawing them in. And I think when you're passionate and excited about something, all this, I think that's what I love about middle school. Like, you can hate a subject, but if you have a cool teacher, the subject is cool. You're like, oh, you care so much about science, I guess I do too. And so it's this excitement, I think, or love of learning. Like, guys, I personally, I do not love math, but I had really good math teachers. And so I learned a lot in that subject. And so it's just fascinating. My husband just read this book by Parker Palmer, The Courage to Teach, I think it's called. And it's fascinating because it's like having the subject be the center, and not like this expert teaching you, but it's like the subject is the center. And so it's a different model of teaching. And he could explain it significantly better than me, but it kind of reminds me of a coaching model where it's like, there are some things that, like, you're the expert on you, but I'm the expert on coaching and getting you to where you want to be. And so how can we like team together to get you there? And I'm interested in like how that looks in a classroom setting.
Right.
Because with one-on-one, it's obviously significantly different. But with this teacher classroom, and I'm sure there's books written about this, or there's so many. Lately I've been getting like giddy/overwhelmed about how many books I want to read about. Oh, that's fascinating, this is so good. And so I just get like, okay, I'm gonna have a little plan. But people spend their life diving into these questions and these things, and so I think that's what I get so excited about. And if people are willing to put in the time, like, of course, yeah, I'll share that information with you. So yeah, that's what gets me excited, is like, how do you get people to care? How do you get people to be excited? Or, I mean, not even excited, really, it's care. care enough to do something about it. And in this case, we're talking about students.
And this is that coming like
Yeah.
the revolution of education. Like it's so in the space that I feel like the thing that excites me too is it doesn't feel like there's a competition or any competition to get there first, because it's not like you're not doing it for your benefit. It's like,
Yeah.
no, we need to get there as a society. Like we need to start valuing empathetic listening as much as we value a math score.
Mm,
And
yes.
if we did that, just that, like that could help. So like that could help eliminate so much unnecessary pain
Yes.
from human interactions with each other. And it's there. We could do that tomorrow if we wanted to.
It's like, yeah, what's the tipping point? I think that's huge. And there's so many, I feel like that would change so many things, because for kids, they might care more about math scores if they were empathetically listened to. There's this exchange that goes on where it's like, and depending on what's happening in the kid's life, they're like, I sincerely don't care about this right now. Genuinely, I don't see how this affects my life.
Right. Like that's what you would get if you try to train, you could try to help a 10-year-old learn to empathetic listen.
Yeah. I think parents would be on board with that too. Should be.
It's fascinating to see, like, coaching maybe has a marketing problem. Yeah, but we'll see. We'll figure it out.
I guess. Yeah. Yeah. It is cool though, because I've felt that in our like coaching, even just with my circles of coaching that I've gone through with colleagues and friends, and that through the classes, is it's not this weird. There's plenty of people in the coaching world, plenty of clients. I don't feel this fierce competition. I definitely feel like it's collaborative in like, hey, what worked for you in your situation? I've had so many friends be like, oh yeah, call me anytime with questions on that. Oh, if you want to start your business, I'll let you know what worked for me. And so it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's this exciting thing where it's like, let's get the word out there. It's kind of like with anything that's good for you though. It's hard to make that your sole like sustainable thing, but also accessible to people who, not making it too expensive or affordable, or accessible to people who wouldn't. That's my passion, is like, I want to coach kids who would not be able to afford it. So how can I, pair with nonprofits or specific schools to make that happen? Because I think that will help close the opportunity gap of, just where you're born should not determine like the outcome of your life. So yeah, I get really excited about those possibilities with coaching.
Right. And there are so many, I mean, I feel like that's once there's a very clear, A to B, if a student is coached, they're more likely to persist and graduate in school, which is true. But when that is even more delineated and known, I feel like then there's a money incentive for a school to hire coaches.
Yeah. Well, and we need to value education more as well. There's a lot of layers of that, I would say, because education, I mean, yeah, when you have educated citizens from top to bottom, like the outcomes of your country are just healthier, better. Yeah. So we'll work on it. We'll work on it as coaches.
I think the biggest challenge is, I think to people getting into coaching or hiring a coach, is indifference. It's not, that's the biggest competitor. It's that, oh, I don't really need this. I can do it on my own. And it's fascinating to me to really be and see people and see them laboring through, and then know that they are not working with a coach. But when you start working with a coach, the difference that it can make in your own life, it might be subtle at times, but it can also be extreme, especially compounded over time.
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the coolest things about the 2.0 experience, or 1.0 too, is that you are coached every single week.
That's one of my favorite things about it. Yeah. you get this rich experience of working on your own stuff too, or achieving goals or going, like where do you
Right.
want to go?
Right. So the question is, in that 6 month period, what growth did you as a client get out
Oh,
of the two?
it came at such a cool time for me because I was pregnant, and we were going through all these transitions. We were moving to Denver away from our community in Tulsa that we loved. So like new people, new place, new Jordan, my husband was going into law school. We're having our first baby. And so it came at this beautiful time of change and transition. And so I think one of my biggest takeaways from that was I was seeing motherhood as like, oh, all these things I can't do anymore. And the reframe of, oh no, this is an expansion of who I am. This actually fits beautifully into who I want to be, and being a lifelong learner, and really like kids keep you on your edge. I knew that from teaching, but now I'm like, whoa, it's a whole new level. And you're only a baby. Like you can't even talk yet. He can say like 4 words, but it's crazy. I think it helped prepare me for that and transition me into it. To have those little go-to sentences to figure out like how to stay healthy myself so I can be a good like mom and wife, and still feel like a person. And then you have all of the other things going on with your body and your mind and your hormones. So it was very grounding for me. It was a very like grounding moment in each week to be like, okay. And I don't know if you remember this, but I think Nico was like 2 weeks old. My son's name is Nico. And I remember my husband had class, and I had to coach with him. He had to come to class with me. And it was one of the best coaching sessions I'd ever had with somebody in class. And I was like, wow, that went way, but thanks for that, Nico. Like, so
I remember that.
yeah,
I was totally surprised you were still here. It's like, or yeah, after 2 weeks, it's like, what?
it was good. It kept me like,
Me
I
at
looked
2 weeks.
forward
I
to
feel
it.
like a win for me is like, did you shower today? Like, yes.
That's still a win.
Woo! You have won the day. Showing up to a 2 hour course, a class course, that would just be out so far outside the realm of. I was impressed. I remember that.
Thank you. It felt really like it felt normal to do stuff like that, and I really enjoyed when that happened. So it felt like an epic win for me too. And it was once a week for 1 hour. So I was like, we can do this.
I was really impressive. And it was so, I think the babies hold such precious sweet space. Like there's such a,
Oh yeah.
like it's just, they hold space well. And yeah, that definitely brought that energy. RB, we have to wrap it up. What would be a good wrap up on this one? How can what's on the horizon? How can coach training, EDU, and the community support you? What's the
Oh gosh. I was gonna like leave a question out there like for people, not for me personally. Um I don't know the answer to that. I think just continuing to, I love the fact that you guys are doing these conversations and then making them podcasts, because most people can't make them live. And continuing to reach out. I think the idea of making coaching available, I don't know if you've created that app yet we talked about, but
It's in
making
production.
oh good.
It's totally in production. Yes.
I think making coaching affordable and available to people so they can experience it is such a big deal, because I think people are open to the idea, but it's like, where's that sweet spot of like, we've put a lot of training and love and time and energy and attention into it. So we should like be able to live off of doing this, to make some money off of it. But then there's also that other side where it's like people think, oh, of course I'm interested in that, but I don't have the time or money to do that. Okay, well, what if you had the time? Okay, well, what if so it's like, where's that sweet spot? So I think getting the message out there, continuing to be advocates like you guys are, for it. But yeah, spreading the word about it is such a big deal. That
Cool.
awareness. It's the awareness piece.
And yeah, I mean, and you know, any educators listening, educators in the community, there is there's a lot of positivity happening in education, and
Mhm.
there are pockets of really cool things happening that I feel like coaching is a part of. Sharing success stories, the
Yeah.
things that I know that matters with uh, feeling like progress is being made. And from what I see, progress is being made in education. So I feel like will we see it in our lifetimes where every teacher is also a trained academic life coach? Probably not. But will it happen within the next 50 years, 100 years? I think so. I think so.
I see that, and that hope is contagious. That like gets me excited to be like, yeah, why not?
It will happen. A state's going to do it. A state's going to mandate it. It's going to be, and then it's going to go from one to, then the whole country is going to do it. It's going to happen at some point,
I love that.
simply because it works. Like this isn't like, oh,
That's not, I was like,
romantic
that's a
thinking.
pretty good argument.
Right. It's going to happen. I mean, someone's going to figure it out, and who can make this happen. But this is what Coach Train EDU, and this is the larger vision of what we're trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
Thanks for being a part of that, B. It's so good to see you again. I mean, I miss our class. That
It
was
was so
fun.
good. I was
Really,
honored that it was your last one that you were teaching. I'm like, oh, good. This is, yeah, it was very special.
I
So thank you
taught
for asking me.
nearly continuously for 10 years. I led these webinars for 10 years, nearly continuously, never taking more than maybe a 2-week break. And I miss it. I miss it.
Oh,
This
I
is
mean,
it. This is my 1 hour a week now. I mean, there's a million other projects I feel like I'm maybe catching up on, but yeah, woo, here we go. It's time. I feel like it's really time for coaching now in this environment to say, look, like this will help. This will make a difference. Let's get on board with this.
yeah, I think as people experience it, the excitement is going to spread because, yeah, you
Agreed.
can't, once you experience it, you're like, oh, okay, I understand what you mean.
It works. It works.
Yes.
Thank you, B. It's good to see you.
It's
Other
great.
listeners, to get more of B, go to the Coach Train EDU blog. This has been another episode of the Coaching the Flourish podcast. Thanks, everyone.